What's going on, gamers? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're just going to jump straight into the video and get into some quickfire tips basically regarding Soulframe. If you've picked up the game for the first time, there's going to be a couple little things that are slight learning curves if you like, or at least they were for me. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Now, some of these are going to be more major and perhaps more minor than others, but all of this is fairly relevant if you are a new player or someone that's just getting to grips with the game in general. So starting us off, tip number one has got to be learning the dodge format. So basically, if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, many of you will know that shift is your dodge key. You can press it once, you can double tap it to fully dodge out of the way of projectiles or attacks, but there is quite a key thing here that you'll kind of get used to as you begin to play. For some of the enemy attacks, it's not enough to just double tap shift and then jump out of the way. Sometimes you don't clear the projectile radius. So what you can do is press shift once, leave a tiny delay, and then press shift again. And instead of just diving out of the way at a shorter distance, you'll actually dodge and shift your body over quite a lot more, a lot quicker, allowing you to attack a lot more quickly and frequently as well. Now, the benefit to this is if after that distance and that gap, you still need more space, you can then double tap the shift key again and go into a dive roll, launching yourself even further to get yourself out of harm's way. It takes a little bit of min-maxing, a little bit of practice, but once you get used to it, it becomes kind of second nature. And before you know it, you're sort of strafing your way out of danger a lot quicker than just diving. Tip number two is just quite simple, really. Keep your eyes peeled for weapon racks. This is where a lot of your steel resources will come from. This is something I overlooked massively when I first started the game. When it came to crafting new weapons or just generally looking for resources in general, I found that I was quite short on steel. And I didn't even realize I could go and loot the weapon racks. I was looting the chests, I was killing enemies and looting their body, but I wasn't taking advantage of the massive weapon racks that were standing right next to me that you could get a lot of materials from. Now, typically, just a short disclaimer, if you're not sure on what can be looted, make sure you use your spectral sense, because that will kind of highlight what can be looted a majority of the time. But just try everything. A lot of things in this game can be interacted with for good purpose to use later on for crafting, material gathering, that sort of thing. Next up, I would highly recommend turning off all of the chats to begin with. I personally did this as a new player, especially if you're not really considering pursuing multiplayer content straight away. Reason being is, to be honest, for me, it looks a little bit messy on the screen regardless of size. Yes, you can turn the sizing of the chat down, you can make it bigger, but realistically, I just found it quite ugly on the screen. It was kind of bothering me even though I was moving it around. But more importantly, there were spoilers, and people do really well in the community to not spoil things. But naturally, as people are chatting in region chat, asking questions to each other, there's going to be topics that perhaps you don't want to hear about, or people asking questions about stuff that's further on in the game that you haven't even reached yet that will get spoiled for you. So do yourself a favor, go into settings, turn off all of the chats, and you'll be absolutely fine, and you'll thank yourself for it. And then you can always turn them back on if you've got a relevant question to ask. Now, another setting that I changed really early on was making sure that my compass is always on. Naturally, the game would just fade it in and out as and when it needs it, but I found myself losing my direction from time to time and then kind of having to load up the map and hit my guide all the time as well. And having the compass on all the time really gives you a decent lay of the land. It stops you having to retread or repress the same keys over and over again. Now, if you have just started the game, a huge priority you are going to want to focus on is unlocking your ancestors. Now, if you've come from Warframe, this will essentially be your ship's components. So that's pretty much what it is in Soulframe. This will help you build out your camp, unlock more functions for you, like blacksmithing, like transmog, for example, the ability to buy things in a cash shop if you want to do that. And really, without diving into those ancestor quests, you will struggle with basically anything, really, to be fair. You'll be able to collect materials and go out and explore, but you won't really have a great deal of things to do with them. Most of the ancestor quests are pretty well laid out from the beginning, but there are a couple which are a little bit more hidden, for example, like the witch. But either way, all of these ancestors, all of these NPCs are pretty useful. So don't neglect them. If you are struggling to find them, I wouldn't recommend breaking the immersion and going on Google, but if you really are struggling, especially to find like the blacksmith, for example, then I'd recommend just having a little look online, perhaps if you absolutely have to. For the most part, though, your guide, your sparrow, whatever it is you're following, should pretty much get you there for a majority of these NPCs. As you progress through the game, you'll start to stumble across multiple different enemy types. A lot of them are humanoid to begin with, but you'll also notice a couple of different tendencies between the enemies. Some will heal, some will attack from range, and some of them will even explode when they are close to death. So just be mindful of that, especially if you're a melee character, for example, and you're closing the gap and you've sort of settled down after a fight thinking, oh, I got through that one. Just be careful because it's caught me off guard a number of times, and it really, really hurts if that goes off next to you. The next tip is kind of more finicky, if I'm honest. There are a lot of interactables in the game, both quest related and both general use. But some of them really require you to be at a certain direction or, a certain angle on the object before you can actually interact with it. And there's been times where I've actually walked away from the object because nothing's popped up. And I thought, oh, well, clearly I'm not supposed to be here. So I guess my point is just kind of do a 360 around whatever it is you're trying to interact with and just kind of spam F, because sometimes it works really well. Sometimes not at all, and it can lead to a little bit of frustration. As you learn very early on, your spectral sight is going to become very important to you. There are a lot of interactions in Soulframe that rely on the spectral sight, not just outside of combat, but also in combat as well. Spectral sight can reveal hidden doorways, hidden interactables, hidden enemy interactions, and generally can just help you get the lay of the land a little bit better. Typically, what I would say is if you hit a metaphorical and physical wall in progression, then use your spectral sight and it will normally illuminate the way forward. I guess a huge example of this would be if you are entering the Green Pact, the Spirit Pact home base for the first time. Really without spectral sight, you're not going to know, what to do, what to interact with. There are also, certain things that you can destroy out in the open world to give you materials, but you won't know where to hit them unless you use your spectral sight, or even if it comes to collecting the many kind of like dazzling history clouds that you can kind of sap in. I don't really have a better term for that, but yeah, spectral sight, just use it and you'll thank me. Now, typically, like most points on this list, this is probably going to be subject to change, but right now, out of my experience, I would say the further north that you travel on the map, it gets more and more dangerous. There is some stuff south that I've kind of run into, but the northern territory, northern parts of the map, you're quite easily stumbling into level 25s, 30s, so on and so forth. So if you are new and you're kind of just trying to work out where you're supposed to be, just try and stay central to that hub that you first spawn in at. And then once you're more comfortable with your class, with your weapons, then you can branch out a bit further afield. I will just add that it's not just the enemy levels that get higher and slightly more difficult. It's also the composition of the enemy camps that you're walking into, and some of the enemies in general. A lot of them change form altogether. You're fighting different types of enemies. A lot of them have party compositions where there's a healer, 2 range, maybe a caster, a tank. It really gets quite messy. So you can quite often find yourself stumbling around in the beginning area, just following your nose, fighting level 5s and 7s, and then before you know it, boom, you're hit with a level 30, and maybe even a mini-boss sometimes. There's elite enemies just wandering around that can really catch you off guard. This game has many fantastic cutscenes. I was actually blown away, really, by the scope and just really the work that's been put into this game visually. But after a while, some of them do kind of get a little bit tedious, especially the ones out in the open world when you're rescuing animals, for example. But did you know you can skip these? A lot of people probably already know this. It's common knowledge. If you hit spacebar, it'll give you the option to skip them, so you're not watching yourself, I don't know, nurse a duck every 5 minutes, but just do that and you'll thank yourself quite a lot. You'll save yourself a lot of time. Now, right now on the current client, if you Alt-Tab out of the game and you're not on borderless full screen, for example, you can find yourself getting some ghosting when you tab back into the game. The color palette changes a little bit, it just looks a little bit off, and there's quite an easy way to reset that. If you're out in the open world, for example, hold down your tab key, go back to the main hub, and it should just reset it. But really, I play on borderless full screen, mainly because I'm recording and doing other little things, and typically I have a really smooth experience. This game is really well optimized, so if you are on full screen because you feel like you have to be for performance reasons, I promise you it's probably not like that. You might have an easier time on borderless, but yeah, if you're struggling with the artifacting or the ghosting, then reset yourself back to the main hub and back in. That should sort it. If you've done a lot of your quests, or you finished most of the chains early on, you're kind of wondering, well, where do I go now? What do I look out for? Well, what I would suggest is keep an eye out for some of the red balloons that are positioned around the map. Some of these are easier to get to than others, and some could be more rewarding than others. Some of these balloons will just point to particular points of interest, where some of them can actually start quest lines. A prime example of this is where you start the she-wolf quest, the giant white wolf. This is kind of pointed towards with a giant red balloon. And yeah, you know, if you're struggling for inspiration, shout out to my cat right now having a bath in the background. But if you're struggling for inspiration or just a general idea of where you're going, then, you know, keep your eyes out for the shining red balloons. But for the most part, go out and have fun. So on to the last few tips now. If you are stumbling across a lot of gray mobs, and what I mean by that is mobs with gray health bars, you know, whether it be bosses, whether it be regular enemies, that is because the enemy's armor class is higher than the damage output of the weapon you're currently using. So you can either do one of two things here. You either just leave that area and go and fight something else, level up a little bit more, or if you're using like a side weapon, a sidearm, for example, that you're trying to level up, swap to your primary that I presume is higher level, and you'll soon see that health bar will change back to red. Now, I should note you can still do damage to these enemies. Your light attacks will often just do 1 damage, but if you heavy attack, you will still do a reasonable amount of damage. And lastly, just to follow on from a previous point we've made, not all quests are directly available in the initial chain that you follow right from the beginning. Some of them do require a bit of exploration, like the She-Wolf quest, for example, and I believe the Witch quest as well isn't directly linked to the beginning tutorial, the beginning chain of events. Now, if you're like me, I'm quite happy to just kind of follow my nose and just explore, and things will just unfold in front of me, and I was quite fortunate to just find these anyway. But I know some people have taken a length of time and still not found them. So just know that the information is readily available on the internet if you're struggling to find those quests. But, you know, I would highly recommend you just play the game for what it is, sink some time into it, and you will naturally stumble across them. And when those interactions happen, they are so rewarding. So yeah, anyway, didn't want to fill you guys with too much rubbish or yap on for too much. That's pretty much all I've got. Enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.